Okay, so now we should be live on YouTube, and I want to welcome everyone who's here in the room with me. My name is Andrea Pompey-Lacey. And I'm here to teach you a little bit about planning and zoning. Today, we're only going to be scratching the surface. As I got into creating this presentation, I realized that this should be a whole semester course if you really wanted to teach P&Z 101. So that's why we have degrees in this area. So again, my name is Andrea. I'm the planning administrator here for Bourbon County, the City of Paris, City Millersburg, and City North Middletown. I'm going to get into a little background on how that arrangement came to be. I have been working for the Bourbon County Joint Planning Commission for since 2016, so going on 3 years, and we are located in the Paris Municipal Center. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about us. So the Bourbon County Joint Planning Office is composed of three full-time staff members. Myself as planning administrator, Mickey Sosby, who is the planning technician, so she's the one who you often will be speaking to first and foremost when you either walk in the door or give us a call. And Michelle Thornsberg is our building inspector and code enforcement officer. So between the three of us, we have quite a bit on our plates. So I want to go over our topics for today. Again, we're just going to be scratching the surface. You'll see highlighted in yellow, we're going to talk about planning and zoning. We also want to share with you a little bit about what is a day like in our shoes, in our office, and some of the responsibilities and activities that we partake in. And then I chose a case example from 2018 that I think would make the topic of planning and zoning a little bit more interesting, because this isn't the most invigorating of topics to listen about. So we're going to talk about a recent development plan that I feel like is a really good example of economic development in Paris and Bourbon County. And then we'll talk a little bit about the long-range planning opportunities. And so for those who are listening in or here today and want to get more involved, I'm going to give you a few ways to participate. So what is planning? Planning generally is about looking forward, about looking to the future, and really starting to establish that vision and being deliberate about what you would like to achieve as a community. So whereas, we each develop our own little 5-year plans or 10-year plans or lifetime plans that we would like for our future, planning for the community is inclusive of people from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, socioeconomic positions. And so that's what planning is really all about, is making sure that we're not just planning for the select few, and so that everyone is being encompassed in those planning efforts. And some of the top reasons we do so is so that we can live healthy and happy lives, so that we can have good health, so that we can be successful, and so that we can live safe lives with little stressors. So I picked one of a lot of different acts that have occurred, different legislation, mandates, etc., that have occurred that have really progressed the reason why we plan. And initially, the reason why we started planning, we started having zoning and certain type of housing restrictions and regulations, was because of overcrowding, unhealthy conditions, unsanitary conditions, And early on, during the Industrial Revolution in particular, New York City, which, as you all know, is a very dense city, they had established a tenement law. And so what it did was it helped improve the living conditions of the people who lived in these tenements. This particular picture is from the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and at that particular time, people were living in multiple, whole family maybe in one room. As you can see in this photo here, possibly without a window there. You can see that there's a wood stove, that there's a lot of hazardous conditions in that space. So a lot of the reasons why we have the codes and regulations that we do is for the purpose of having better sanitation, better living conditions. So this is just one of so many different historical acts and legislation that you could even touch upon. So as I was creating this presentation, I thought, oh, I can't just pick one, but that one is extremely relevant. And again, other reason why we plan is because we're required to, because we have codes and ordinances that need enforcing. Gee, I wish we had more staff and resources to enforce a lot of these ordinances that we reference day in and day out. But this the photo here is my pretty much, I don't want to call it my Bible, but what I refer to every single day. We have a property maintenance code in there. We've got the Kentucky Revised Statutes, the state statutes. Also included are the zoning ordinances for each one of our municipalities. So in Bourbon County, we have 4 zoning ordinances. One for Millersburg, one for North Middletown, City of Paris, and the unincorporated county. So we are constantly flipping back and forth between these different documents on a day-to-day basis. So that other requirement that I was referring to earlier about that partnership between these different entities, it originated in a joint interlocal agreement. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that interlocal agreement. It really is what governs the way that the planning office functions. So looking at state authorities and departments, I just listed here to give you an idea of some of those departments that we interact with on a daily basis. They are both people, they are state statutes that we refer to that govern the way that we need to operate our office. So oftentimes, for example, if somebody brings a development plan to our office as part of that review process, we then have to reach out to the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet if it is located on a state road. We have to contact potentially the Division of Water if there's potential floodplain issues on the property. And then when it comes to building and construction, the Department of Housing, Buildings, and Construction is really the office that governs our activities. Okay, sorry for the delay. So these, I have simply in the next couple of slides, I just have listed for your information. These are the organizations that we interact with on a daily basis. So oftentimes when people have questions that aren't directly planning and zoning related, we are always happy to help connect people with the right agency and organization that you need to get in touch with. The joint interlocal agreement is the agreement between all of the jurisdictions that I mentioned before that organizes the planning office and the planning commission. The original agreement was in 1968. In 2015, this agreement was amended, and what that did was created essentially a full-time planning administrator position. It merged the building inspection and code enforcement, and it essentially established a joint office that represents all 4 jurisdictions. And so in that agreement is laid out the services that are offered, the layout of the planning commission, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about here in a few minutes, staffing, what type of positions are staffed within our office, the benefits, and we are actually, for your information, we are employees of the fiscal court. The city of Paris pays 50% of our budget, and the fiscal court pays 50% of our budget as well. And then the financing aspect of the way we manage our budget is included too. It's not working still. Okay, on the next slide are the local agencies that we often interact with, and these are resources that we rely on a daily basis. The emergency manager for Bourbon County is Mike Withrow. He's located in our building. The road departments, I'm sure you know, the fiscal court has their own road department, and the city of Paris has their road department. So depending on the type of applications we receive, we make sure that we contact those staff members for their input on certain plans. We also reference the health department, any statutes or codes that the health department goes by, any building plans that are brought to us that might be out in the county and not on city sewer. We will not issue that building permit until we see that there's been a site evaluation on that property for septic. So we all are interdependent upon one another to be able to conduct the review that we need and to process the permits that we need to. So these are all very important communications in our day-to-day work function. Oh, thank you so much. The Planning Commission. In most of the Planning Commission's functions, it serves as a quasi-judicial board, which means that our public hearings, they function as an actual hearing. If there is an opposing view that has hired legal counsel to the applicant that is proposing their case, the applicant gets their time to present and the opposition gets their time to present. The Planning Commission is supposed to objectively deliberate on this in this public forum. Therefore, one really important point I want to make, and that we have to stress to our commissioners quite often, is our commissioners are actually not supposed to discuss application items, agenda items that are going to be heard in a public hearing outside of that public hearing. So that's one thing that as we hear from the community when applications are out there, they often get very frustrated that they can't reach out to these planning commissioners, but that's how it goes. They're not they don't serve as elected officials. You could call your elected official all day long and talk to them, but the planning commissioners are supposed to reserve that discussion for that public hearing. Something I will also mention is that we do hold planning commission workshops. So this is another forum that planning commissioners might otherwise talk about an agenda item, and we do advertise those workshops in the Bourbon County Citizen, and it is advertised and available for the public to attend. The Planning Commission meets the third Thursday of each month, or as needed. You'll notice that time and again, we may have to have a special meeting, depending on the urgency of the applicant, or if we have maybe a text amendment that's quite large that we need to hold a workshop for, we may schedule a special meeting for that. But meeting notifications are posted in the Bourbon County Citizen on our website. We post all of the meeting materials on our website 1 week in advance to the hearing. So if you ever are wondering, well, what's on the agenda for Planning Commission? Well, you could do a handful of things. You could call our office, you could come to our office, you could go to our website and pull up that agenda, or you could look in the newspaper. So we also post those notifications in social media as well. So the Planning Commission is composed of 14 seats. Okay, not all of the seats are filled at this point in time. However, when the Planning Commission is full, there are 5 seats from the City of Paris, 7 from the Fiscal Court, 1 from the City of North Middletown, and 1 from the City of Millersburg.
Question.
Yes.
When you say 5 from the City of Paris, are those 5 city officials elected, or the City of Paris selects who those 5 are? Where do those 5 come from, I guess is the question.
That's a great question. So actually in the interlocal agreement, it does allow for elected officials of that legislative body to serve on the Planning Commission, but it's only a certain number of their appointments. But all of the appointments come from the mayor and the commission or council. So they essentially would vote on that appointment to the commission. Nikki, if you could just post a message that we'll post the recording afterward. I hate for this to happen, I really do, but Mary Clay's got a recording. I want to thank everyone for their patience. Technology is not always the easiest to work with. So some of the items that the Planning Commission might review are listed here. Those are development plans, whether they are commercial in nature, industrial, subdivisions, and that might be one property owner splitting their property from one parcel to 2, or it could be 100 lot subdivision. So there's a range between different subdivision applications that come before us. If it's a minor subdivision, say someone splitting their property from one parcel into 2, that gets reviewed at the technical review level, whereas major subdivisions and large housing plans will go before the full commission. Text amendments, map amendments, and the comprehensive plan, those are other items that come before the commission. I have an asterisk up here just to draw your attention to some of the items that the planning commission is actually a recommending body for. So for example, you know, any text amendment to the zoning ordinances or a change in a zoning on a piece of property, the commission may deny something, but that doesn't mean that the legislative body may or may not overturn that. Okay, the Board of Adjustment, the 4 Board of Adjustments that we have, those are the other boards that we assist and we help coordinate their meetings. We will process applications. The range of different applications that might come before the Board of Adjustment are conditional use permits, variance requests, and also administrative appeals. So if there's something that maybe a complainant disagrees with and they want to they want to take it to the next level, they could appeal that decision. It could be the issuance of a building permit that someone might disagree with and think is illegal or so forth. They could bring it to the Board of Adjustment to review that complaint. And so shown here are the 4 boards. So in any given month, depending on how busy we are, we could have several Board of Adjustment meetings in 1 month in addition to the Planning Commission meeting. Some other boards that we assist and is the Paris Pike Corridor Commission. The Paris Pike Corridor, as you may know, has it's a special overlay district in the Paris and Bourbon County zoning ordinances. So what this is a protected corridor, and there is a commission that is a recommending body. So any either development application or any sort of enforcement issues along that corridor, that often will come to the Paris Pike Corridor Commission. The Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee is another appointed committee that is composed of members of the legislative bodies, members of the Planning Commission, and we have 3 at-large member positions that are appointed by the Planning Commission. Comprehensive Plan Work Groups. This is a more informal community group that I wanted to put up here because at the end of the presentation I'm going to be talking about and actually trying to recruit you to participate in many of these work groups for the next comprehensive plan update. The last one is the Board of Architectural Review. The Board of Architectural Review is only pertaining to the city of Paris and also to the historic overlay district that we have in and around the Courthouse Square. Okay, so we have that group that reviews any sort of applications that focus on that small group of buildings around the Courthouse Square. So their meetings are pretty infrequent because that area is so small. So a day in our shoes, just for kicks, I put our Halloween, a meeting that we had on Halloween actually with the health department, and we were meeting. We've been working on a form that is kind of like, who you gonna call, you know, type Ghostbusters type thing, like when you have an issue and this is the type of issue, who should you get in touch with? So right now that is in process, and we've been meeting regularly with the health department. So this meeting just so happened to be on Halloween, and we were so tickled that our health department colleagues showed up in costume. So a day in our shoes, I'm going to kind of turn attention toward Mickey for a moment, and we want you all to get a feel for some of the things that we might be doing on a day-to-day basis. And Mickey is really the one that's on the front line. Like, she is the first one answering calls, taking in-person visits. So I just wanted to ask Mickey, what's a typical day for you like as planning technician?
Well, as the planning technician, the first thing I do, and the thing I do the most, is answer the phones. So I take the phone calls and direct them whether they go to actual planning and zoning We also take care of everything for building permits, electrical permits, and code enforcement. We get a lot of calls for that, so I direct those calls, and I accept all the applications, whether for Board of Adjustments or for Planning and Zoning for the Commission. We get those applications in, review them. I schedule all the meetings. If we need to reserve a room like this, normally either Andrew or I can do that. So it's just that the first things that need to happen, and anything that the Planning and Zoning Commission do, I'm usually that person. And then I send it on to the person that really was spearheaded after that. But I take the phone call, I send it to Andrea. Sometimes I'm learning to do the things to answer a lot of questions, but in the meantime, I send it on to the people who know what they're doing. So, but I'm usually the first person everybody will talk to.
But and we always say, if we don't have the answer, we'll help you find it.
Right.
So,
right.
Because oftentimes it's just a matter of finding the right person. And so I've posted our number up on this presentation, and I hope that you all keep it on your speed dial if you really want to. But really, we are always happy to help direct on issues that you may have. We conduct site visits. Any applications that we receive, if it's planning and zoning related, before each commission meeting and before I write my staff report, I will go out there to the site and actually walk the perimeter of the site, and we process those applications. We put out public notifications. So one thing that Mickey didn't touch on, but is so important in our office, is making sure that we are sending out adjoining property letters, that we are posting signage on the properties. That's one thing that we have started to implement recently, whether it's required by KRS or not. And also making sure our legal notification gets sent to the paper on time. In my day-to-day life, I focus oftentimes on putting out fires, so addressing maybe that in-person visit that they might need something right then and there. And so I typically focus my time on those types of issues. However, long-range planning and grant writing is another area that I've been focusing on whenever I have the time to. Recently, we submitted a recreational trails program grant for Legion Park to do a walking path near the Senior Citizen Center, and that was applied for through the fiscal court. And so we do a lot of partnering, because we don't have a full-time grant writer between any of our local departments, and oftentimes it's just a matter of either finding the right person. It sometimes will be through the Bluegrass Area Development District. They're extremely helpful to us, or just writing the grants ourselves. So we do try and focus on that for infrastructure improvement when we can. Also, long-range planning, as far as that is concerned, since my time here, I've focused on comprehensive planning. This effort with the Envision 2040 process is really focused on being as inclusive as we can be, or more inclusive than we have ever been. And bike and pedestrian planning is another area that I've focused on and partnered with the health department. So the planning office is working alongside a lot of these different partners. And we've been working on becoming paperless, more or less. There's always going to be a physical aspect to the applications that come to us, but we're trying to get our materials online and in an electronic format so that we're getting up with the times. So now we're going to move on to the case example that I just am really excited about, and I feel like now that the commission's we've reviewed the application, I can express that excitement a little bit more. I oftentimes try to remain as objective as I can be as I review applications, and so I want to talk about Bourbon Millwork Company. David Purrier, he is expanding his business. David does some amazing custom woodwork, and one of his primary clients is actually the University of Kentucky, and so he does a lot of their restoration work on their historic buildings. And so David came to us back in the spring of this year, and he was actually not looking at the location that's up here on the screen. He was looking at multiple locations. And so one of the first things that he did was get in touch with our office. And I just want to say I got permission from David to use some of his images and to share his story. So David has been working out of this existing building, which is located on East Main Street. While the building has been sufficient for him to a certain extent, he needs more space. So when he came to us, he was first looking at renovating maybe a building downtown. He was looking at some buildings on Main Street, and he approached us and asked, can I put a woodworking shop at this location? And so he had a number of specific locations that he came to us with. And so when David came in to talk with us, and this is what we would do with anyone, we would pull up our zoning map and we would say, well, let's see. Let's look at the zoning map, find the specific area that you're talking about, and see what the zoning is. And then from there, and I'm talking in regards to the city of Paris, we have these quick info sheets that have been really helpful in our day-to-day lives, and it's actually been great to hear from some people as they've called in. They might be from across the country and maybe they're researching something in our community. This is just another format that's an alternative to going through the zoning ordinance. It's a lot easier to navigate, it's a lot more comprehensive. And so when David came in, we looked at the different zoning designations and which ones would allow for a woodworking shop. Now, David in particular was interested in putting a retail space in the front of that shop. So let's take a moment. So I'm not just going through the definitions, you know, all at once. I want to talk about what is zoning briefly. So zoning is used to regulate land use, and what it does is it divides cities and the unincorporated county into districts, and each district will allow for certain uses. And so that's why when you go through the zoning ordinance, if there's a particular use that you want to do in your building, it may or may not allow for that. And so when people come to us, we will constantly reference that zoning ordinance to see. In some different zones, some examples are residential, conservation, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and so those are just to name a few. So once David, he went through probably 3 or 4 different sites that we were talking about. And then he came to me in the summer and he said, I think I want to focus on this site. And so David and I sat down together again. This is probably the 4th or 5th interaction that we've had in his site selection process. So in the summer, we sat down and we looked at the property and we talked about some of the constraints or some of the challenges that he might face in trying to do what he's looking to do on this property. And in particular, the reason why I put this image up there, we looked at the surrounding properties because he was going to need to obtain a zone change. Because that property that he was looking at on Winchester Road, right across from the train depot, it was zoned as residential. And he wasn't going to be able to put his woodworking shop in a residentially zoned property. So we looked at it together to figure out what the appropriate zoning designation would be for a woodworking shop, and that was B2 commercial. So I'm going to go through the steps and the time, just to give you an idea of how long this took. So then once the fall hit, David had connected with a surveyor, and the surveyor, he did a survey of the property, he platted it out, and David submitted an application for a zoning map amendment. And so on this plat that's in front of you, it's showing some of the basic information. It's showing the existing building footprints, the proposed building footprint, and where the adjoining properties are and who owns them. So public notification, it occurs, actually it doesn't occur just as one step. It's kind of intermingled with the process that we go through. And some of these items that are up here on the screen, they're required by KRS, by the Kentucky Revised Statutes, and some of them are items that we have chosen to go above and beyond on to make sure that the information is getting out there to the community. So adjoining property letters for any zoning map amendment, letters have to be sent out to those folks that are adjacent to that parcel. And the information on the public hearing is in those letters. So oftentimes when those letters go out, then we receive the phone calls because our number is included in that. One procedure that we're starting to establish is posting our TRC, or technical review agendas, on our website. So on the day after our filing deadline, the day after we know what's going to be on for that month, we post the agenda on our website. So we're starting to do that just so that to give the community more of a heads up. We publish in the newspaper, even though the legal ads are, I'm sure you know, the legal ads are pretty small in the newspaper. That's what we have budgeted for, and that's what we send in to the paper. We also post the agendas online, and we're starting to post signage on those properties as well. So staff review, and this is where between Mickey and I, Mickey does a lot of the scheduling sometimes. She will process the application, she will get the application to me. I will conduct my site visit. So as in David's case, I went out there to the property. First I met with him and we walked around the property early on, and then I went out there on my own as part of my staff review for the technical review committee meeting. After the technical review committee meeting, which TRC is composed of staff members primarily. So when we receive applications, we'll send them to the various departments so that those department heads can be present there at the meeting. So it might be the road department, it might be the Kentucky Transportation Department, wastewater treatment, electrical department, etc. And if they can't be there at the meeting, we make a point to contact them for them to give us their input as part of that staff review. Then after TRC, we tell the applicant, you need to make this, that, and the other change, or we need more information on this. And so we give them that information, and then they have a deadline to submit that back to us for the commission hearing. And the staff report is ultimately what I deliver at the commission meetings. And if you haven't seen a staff report before, or one that's been put out for a planning commission hearing, I encourage you to get on our website and just kind of play around on the meeting page. So they can get quite lengthy, but what I'm supposed to look at are urban services are what types of utilities can serve that site, compatibility of that site with the surrounding properties. And so that's some of the information that you're seeing here. That's just a snapshot from what I will look at. And then I make a recommendation to the commission. And from there, it's up to the commission to make their decision. And if it's a map amendment, it's going to be a recommendation to the city commission or the whatever legislative body it is. Or if it's a development plan, then the planning commission gets the final say on a development plan. With the exception of an appeal. There's always the opportunity for anyone in opposition to appeal a decision by the planning commission. So the planning commission will review, they will make their recommendation, and in David's case, they made a recommendation for approval, and then his application got forwarded on to the legislative body, which is the City of Paris City Commission. And then David got started on his development plan, because once the city commission did their first and second readings of the zoning map amendment, and that's always subject to that 30-day appeal period, he worked with his engineer to develop a development plan to be reviewed by the planning commission. So then the clock starts again. So he starts working on that aspect of it. That included a pre-application meeting, the application submittal to our office. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. And so this is a glimpse of what the development plan entails. So you can see that in comparison to the zoning map amendment that was submitted, the development plan is in much more detail. There are there are additional requirements with that. There's landscape requirements, there's stormwater runoff requirements where that has to be accounted for. There's ingress and egress to the site. They have to show all of the utilities on the site, address the parking requirements, etc. So now we're in September, and David got his development plan submitted. And this is a rendering of the building that he got approval to construct on his property. And again, starts over again. I won't spend time on this, but you get to understand kind of the interaction and the back and forth between applicants and our office. And then notifications. And then yet again, review by the commission, and once they've reviewed it, a recommendation for approval or denial. And so at this point, we're in November. So in David's example, I liked to use this because this was an underutilized piece of property, vacant property, and he had a vision for it, and it can be a very daunting experience, but our role is to work with the applicant, whether it's something that is, oftentimes we don't have control over what's going to be applied for, obviously, through the planning commission, but whether I as a staff member agree fundamentally or professionally, or if my staff level review doesn't agree with what the applicant has put forth, we still have the responsibility and obligation to treat them respectfully and to give them the public hearing that both the community and the applicant deserves. So that really gets to be our focus when we do have very controversial topics that come up. If we can put on a hearing that all sides are being heard and is as balanced as we can make it, then we're doing a good job. So I'm going to lastly touch on long-range planning. So we have several long-range plans here in Bourbon County, and some of them are older than others. The Paris Pike Corridor Plan was adopted in 1995. The Bike and Pedestrian Plan, that was adopted by the legislative bodies, the Fiscal Court and the City of Paris Commission in 2011. The most recent comprehensive plan for Bourbon County was adopted in 2017. The Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is a regional plan, it encompasses the entire what's called the Area Development District, which is several counties in the central Kentucky region. That hazard mitigation plan was adopted in 2016, and our Community Health Improvement Plan is from 2013, and that is overseen by the health department here. Some of the initiatives that I put up here because I feel like they're great examples of how we've been working to provide opportunities for the community to participate in our planning efforts is the Community Walkability Survey. There are a few of you that had attended that, and that was to look around at how our pedestrian network is around town and identify those areas that are really in need of improvements. The housing demand study that is occurring right now, we had 2 community meetings on that. The study's still in draft format. We've had a lot of back and forth with the University of Kentucky, so but we want to make sure that's as polished as it can be before we put it out to the community. There was a lot of supplemental data and information that needed to be included that wasn't in the initial version that we received. And then the University of Cincinnati study that was done last year. All of these are opportunities for the community to get together, to start talking about issues and come up with solutions to a lot of these issues and come to a consensus on it. And so there are a lot of things that we often say we can agree to disagree, and that may so be it, but we've got to come to agreement on some things, and that's what we strive for in our planning initiatives. And this is the most fun activity that I feel like has been from the past year. We did this chalk and talk activity that was facilitated by the University of Kentucky, and essentially what it's doing is capturing the attention and the input of a lot of people who you wouldn't ordinarily see at a meeting like this, at a presentation like this. You know, we're all adults here. The kids at these events, you know, the kids were sharing some of the things that they really would like to see. Water park, you know, fun family entertainment, that type of stuff. And so it really, the chalk and talk activity really provided a voice for a lot of folks who we might not ordinarily interact with. And so I'm extremely grateful to have had that opportunity. And all of the information from these reports are on our website. This information is being incorporated into the comprehensive plan to help identify those gaps and to reflect what it is the community wants and needs. Okay, and lastly, I'm going to hit upon the Envision 2040 update process, and this is an extremely ambitious process that we're putting forth, but we want to do it the right way. We want to have that community participation, and there's a couple of activities and groups that I want to draw your attention to. Community working groups, if you haven't heard about them already, there are different topic areas that will be covered in the comprehensive plan. Those are listed up here on this slide, and if you are interested in participating in any of these work groups, please get in touch with us. Mickey brought a sign-in sheet with her if you'd like to add your name, or even just to get information on the process. We have built a contact list of over 1,000 email contacts that, you know, we we're really thrilled about, because we can get information out to people who we otherwise wouldn't have been able to before. On the table is another really interesting activity that will launch in the spring. And what this is actually the next slide has it on there. And if you paid much attention to Lexington, to their comprehensive plan update, they did an on the table activity. And what it's asking the community to do is get a group of your friends together, get a group of your church members together, sit down in a common place and talk about some of the things that you're concerned with, and then relay that information back to us as the planning office. And Lexington did this activity, and they had, I think, over 10,000 participants, and that was just on one day. But this is another opportunity to reach folks that might not have the time to come to, a meeting. And so we're going to be launching that in the first half of 2019. That will occur over a 1-week period. And then lastly, the work groups, as I was saying before, and the purposes of those work groups. If you haven't already signed up and if you have interest, please let us know. And then lastly, I just want to draw your attention to our website. We've put a lot of work into our website over the past 2 years. It's come a long way, and it now is part of our day-to-day operation in our office. So it's there for you all as a resource. And when you can't find something that you want or need that's not on the website, contact us, please. Okay, and then lastly, this is our contact information. Tomorrow we're having a holiday meet and greet at the planning office, but it's not just for the planning office, it's for a variety of other organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, Tourism, Economic Development Authority, Adult Education, which is now called Skills U, and CASA, the court-appointed special advocates. So we're all going to have a potluck breakfast, and we'll be there to meet and greet from 9 to 1 tomorrow. So thank you all so much for your patience. And at this point, we'll take any questions that you have.
On the commission, planning commission, 14 members, does it have to be an unanimous vote, or is it a majority vote for anything to go through?
So the question is for the planning commission, for their vote on any particular agenda item. Does it have to be unanimous, or does it have to be majority vote? And the answer is it has to be majority.
Who's down 14? 7-7, who breaks the 9? Lou?
It typically doesn't happen.
And who are you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Guy Bowman. I'm the chairman of the planning commission,
Thank you.
and I've been on the planning commission since 2001. And I'm actually in the Clintonville district, I'm a citizen member, so I'm actually in the Clintonville district, one of 14 members. But I work very closely with Andrea and Vicky, and also Michelle, and a lot of things that happen with the planning commission I'm directly involved with. I'm an ex-officio member of all the committees on as far as the comprehensive plan, review, the technical aspects of the plans, assignment of any kind of plans or development plans that are approved. But I'm basically the citizen portion of that works directly with staff and also judge executive and also the mayor and city commission and fiscal court. we've got,
I'm just trying to learn, so.
oh, that's great. I'm glad y'all are here. This is awesome because, as you can see, you probably may not have known all the aspects that the Planning Commission touches about the city. We don't truly like control any of them, but we have involvement in all of them. So it's one of those things that it helps us on the Planning Commission. From you saw all of those long-range planning aspects that she had on the board. All of those items involve the Planning Commission in one way or the other. But with, say, the Paris Pike Corridor Commission, the Paris Pike Corridor Commission is actually made up of a joint commission between Van County and Bourbon that cover the entire section of the Paris Pike Corridor. And it's a beautiful, beautiful stretch of road. They want to protect it. So they, long ago, had to put in place, they put all of those overlay ordinances in place to protect the road. And there is a commission that watches over it. And so that's just a piece of it. But all of those pieces that you talked about, the Planning Commission is somewhat involved in all that between the health and the welfare and safety of the city. It's an important piece. We take it very seriously. So, go ahead. Any other questions?
Okay, I have another one. The Bourbon millwork was 8 months from inception to completion, I guess. Is that kind of a typical time frame?
And that's just the review process. So, yeah, I would say that's very typical.
Thank
So
you.
that compared to other counties around us, same time, or is it some kind of fast track?
I'm sure other counties have a faster track than that, but as far as the notifications are concerned, and I think doing it the right way, and when I say the right way, you know, David wasn't quite ready to submit a development plan until he had his map amendment approved. But if somebody really had their ducks in a row, they could have submitted a development plan at the same time as a zoning map amendment, and the commission could have made their recommendation on both of the items at one time. So it could have cut the process back a little bit.
That's all I have there. They do that. He did have a couple of extra steps just because it was a zone change. So a zone change not only comes to the Planning Commission, we're a recommending body, so then it goes on to the legislative body, which in this case was the City Commission. So they have to go by their schedule, their meetings. So it kind of adds a little bit of time for that. So not only a development plan, but zone change and some things like that. So not all applications take that long, but it depends on what they're truly on.
So if they went to an existing building that was zoned properly, it would have been.
It could have been much quicker, yes.
This
They could have been,
the worst case
it
scenario.
could have been a couple of months. Yes.
And he did a very good job of comparing and contrasting different properties. You know, oftentimes somebody will have one property, you know, they're fixated on that one property and they just want to move ahead with it. But what I appreciated a lot about the way he approached it was he was looking for the property that was going to work, not only work for him, but work for the surrounding area as well. So that took a little more time comparing and contrasting different properties. Yeah.
You had up on the screen earlier like 6 different classifications, or 5 or 6 different classifications of a potential business. How is it determined when something might be agriculture turning into a commercial business?
Well, in the agricultural district, what I would refer to is the allowable conditional uses in that district. So oftentimes you'll have listed, and there are, gosh, at this point it's almost A through Z of different conditional uses that can occur. And it does, there's a gray level, or a gray area, obviously, but the conditional uses are essentially oftentimes commercial uses that are allowable in the agricultural district. So we do have to use a level of discretion when we're deciphering that. Well, thank you all again, and please come see us tomorrow if you're hungry. And you know it's Friday. Come see our office, and if you have any concerns that you want to express or anything you want to discuss, you're more than welcome to come see us anytime. So thank you.